I know. Waiting for this dang thing to come on. Come on. Pop out chat. Chat, go to chat. Oh, that's a bummer. All right. Good morning, everybody. So just letting me get my chat thing set up here. I still didn't get the to put my live stream link in. So let me do that real quick. And there we go. And bring that over here. And voila. Hi from Russ. Good morning. How are you doing, Russ? All right, let me see what else I got going on here. So you can see, look at that. I got some actual decent webcam going on from a camcorder, actually. My little capture card. So we're moving up in the world, boys. Wait till you see the next live stream where I got the whole overlay video thing going on. So good morning, everybody. As always, if you want access to the live chat, I'm going to go ahead and pop up Discord here. So go ahead and get into Discord if you're a patron, or if you're joining us on YouTube and connecting that way, go ahead and drop any of your comments down in the live chat and we'll start answering some questions and whatnot. Let me get this Discord opened here and show you what I'm talking about on that. If you, again, are a patron or wish to become one to get a little bit more access, honestly, the patron thing for the access levels, I just can't get to everybody all the time. So some people, it's just a way to, for people that really need the help, that's an avenue to go. I just can't answer all the questions all the time that come my way. So it kind of gives people an avenue if they really need it. If you are a patron or are going to or have any specific questions, whatnot, I'm going to go ahead and pop into the office hours here and you can jump in as well. And you would be on the air essentially at that point. So you can go ahead and ask the questions, whatnot, and we will start to address your specific needs. Otherwise, if you're a little bit more shy or whatnot and just want to drop a log or type in some questions, if you're a patron, go ahead and put those under office hours here, and I will keep an eye on that, and we can address those. Lots of times, though, my patrons don't have as many questions, I guess, because on the previous live streams we didn't have any. So I'm going to, in the meantime, take questions from the chat here on YouTube. So let me get my screen game going here. Get this over here and whatnot, and we can start firing away at some stuff. I did post a video this morning that was on cinematic flying and whatnot, looking at the low pass rates or low passes on the RC signal. So if you haven't checked that, or if you have checked that out and have any specific questions on that, I'd be happy to address those. And in the meantime, let's see if we got going. It's got some chats rolling in here. Let me get this set up as well. Oh, look at that. Why did it do that? What if I go back to here? That's interesting. Huh. So it just shut off. That's great. Well, I got to work on my camcorder game here yet. Let me turn on my laptop. Well, and there we go. That's not as good, but it's something. I don't know, my Sony, I guess there's a timeout because it wasn't recording. I don't know. I'll probably have to adjust that. There we go. I touched the screen. Now it works. Hey, what do you know? I guess there's a timeout on the camera. I'll have to mess with that in a little bit. All right, so we do have some backup cams here as well. So I think that's this one. No, that's this one. Okay, we can use that one. I got HD. What about this one? Oh, the HD is not plugged in. That's why. All right, let's hit on the questions here. I have two. So from one of the questions here is, I have two JM CM F4 6 servos there, but how to define fifth servo as my gimbal servo? Fifth servo as your gimbal servo. So if you're in beta flight, that's a longer question than we'll probably be able to address here on the live chat. But if you're in beta flight, that is probably the wrong start. I would go into iNav, and I don't know if I have iNav here. So I guess a follow-up question, are you in iNav on that? If you're in iNav, you can go and set that up in the outputs, and then you have to tie it to your gyro signal and invert the motion so that if the gyro detects light, the servo goes left, so on and so forth. So hopefully on iNav, that's where you want to be for something like that, not beta flight so much. I don't think beta flight's going to have the tools you need for that. So give that a look. If once you get iNav all loaded, that would be something we can specifically look at. But I'd have to kind of mess with it myself a little bit to really address that. Any other items here? I guess as we're waiting for that, so here's the iNav configurator. I don't have, unfortunately, a board flash with iNav, I don't think. No. Not at the moment, I don't. So it's not something I'm going to be able to flash over and do pretty quick. Yeah, I know you're beta flight, but I think where you want to be is you really want to get onto iNav for that, not so much beta flight. I just think beta flight's going to not have the tools you need, where iNav is kind of customized for that. I mean, when you're flying, there's nothing wrong with iNav in flight performance wise. They've made a lot of improvements. Powell Bakalski, one of the iNav devs, has ported in a lot of things from beta flight and altered, and created some stuff himself, or tweaked some of the stuff himself from beta flight. So the biggest thing is it now has a dynamic filter until, I don't know, about 6 months ago or whatnot, iNav never had a dynamic filter. So it was something that I thought was a pretty big thing that they needed. So now that it has that, the next release, 2.6, will have a feed forwarding. Right now they use D-term set point weight in 2.5 iNav, so it's a little limiting there. And it actually has a D-term limit, which is kind of weird. I put that on PAL's radar, and that's all fixed up with 2.6 iNav. And I don't know that I don't think they're on 2.6 yet. Let me see here. Yeah, they're still on at 2.5.2. So 2.6 iNav will be really good with feed forward and that D-term limit thing being solved and everything like that. So check that out. That's where I would go if I were you. All right. Just hanging out yeah. So, all right. Any other questions on here? Servo limits 4. So I got 6 servos, meaning 4 motors and 2 extras. Yeah, I understand. That servo pathing through the gyro signal to a gimbal is what you're going to want, since it doesn't have a built-in gyro. I'm assuming you're trying to take the gyro signal from the quad and use that to control your gimbal. So next question here is question about 96 kilohertz motors, PWM and D-Shot 1200 versus D-Shot 2400 with an F3 ESC on a 5-inch quad. All right, but what's the question? You gotta tell me the question. So I guess from 96 kilohertz, it is interesting. I've seen on the F3 flight control boards that they don't allow lower PWM signals. Let me see if I can go back to this. Now it seems like it's on. I don't know what the deal is. Yeah, so let's see if that will. And what I want to do here is I want to actually copy this. Let's do some live stream setup as we go. Paste reference. There we go. Bring this over here, like that. And then hopefully go like that, ish. And then do something like this. There we go. Hopefully you guys are seeing that. So back to the 96 kilohertz. So we can bring that up. That's an interesting topic. So let's see if we can do that here. So PWM motor output. See if I can get any handy reference images. If not, we'll just use the good old paint and bring that up. So let's go to, yeah, let's go to here. This is a handy reference image. So the PWM signal from your ESC to your motor, and this is a pretty good reference image. It's not, they're talking about something different for this image, but the gist of the image is good. Let me see if I can get that a larger screen. So what's going on with that is, bring this back over. Come on. Yeah, let's just use this. So what's going on with that is as you are varying your throttle, electricity is pretty straightforward. It's on or off. You have the voltage going to each leg of your motor. So you have the three phases of voltage and it's on or off. So if you're at 100% throttle, it's sending full voltage to each leg as the stator is going around. It's giving the full pulse of energy into that phase to spin the magnet to the next one and keep going. As you reduce your throttle, it's not giving the full, it's not just opening the gate or closing the gate to give it full voltage. It's actually pulsing that power on and off as the magnet is coming around. So you have your motor magnet, you have your stator, well, we have the motor magnet on the outside and the stator's here. You have the motor magnet on the outside and the stator's here. Instead of at the right cycle time, this pole becoming fully charged and it sucking the magnet in and then flipping the magnet out as it pushes past the other side, it will pulse the energy in the coil here. So it pulses it, and if you're at zero throttle, obviously it doesn't send any energy to it. At 25% throttle, it will pulse the power on and off in the coil so that the end result is it's not giving full magnetic force to pull the magnet past the stator and fling it past the other side. Well, that pulsation, that's the PWM frequency. It's how quick are those pulses being sent. Is it 24? So is it 24,000 times per second? Is it 48,000 times per second? Or is it 96,000 times per second? The faster it pulses it, and you can see kind of a graph here. This is more like 0% throttle here, 50% throttle here, and 100% throttle here. Well, this is actually 90. 100% throttle, this would just be full, but 90% throttle here. And you can see the average voltage and what that does. So when it's pulsing and there's more gaps in between the pulses, you're only getting a 3-volt average, a 6-volt average, and a 24. And as you know, it's kilovolts. So, or the kV of the motor is based on the voltage, average voltage to it for how fast it's going to spin. So as you're going from like a 24 to a 48, the gap in between here is going to, the amount of dead space in between the two is going to get reduced. So it will give you a smoother signal, but what you give up is braking torque, because it's hard to explain, it's hard to articulate, but the braking here, you can kind of see it here maybe a little bit better, but these gaps in between where it's cycled down, you're going to lose a little bit of braking torque because these little juts of signal going to it are closer together, so there's less deadband at the bottom of each one of those because you have a lot more fit in to that smaller space. So as you're down lower in throttle, you're going to have less braking torque of your motor. So that's what you give up for the higher PWM signals to your motors. If you go up in PWM frequency, like to 96 kilohertz and whatnot, then that will bring it over to here. Bring this over here as well. Then that will smooth out your motor signal and motor inputs. But again, it's going to reduce that that braking torque. So if you want smoother motors, you go a higher PWM frequency, but you're going to lose braking torque, and then braking torque is going to be related to prop wash performance. So you're kind of giving one up for the other. You will need to most likely retune if you go from 24 to 48 to 96 kilohertz. If you're on smaller quads like whoops up to like a 3-inch, you definitely want to go the higher PWM frequencies, just because it reduces the amount of battery consumption. But on larger quads like 3, 4-inch and up, it doesn't make that much of a difference. But it does reduce the low end torque. And you can tell if you tune something on if you kind of have like a loose tune on 24 kilohertz and you go up to 48 kilohertz, you could start to get wobbles and things of that nature. I see this when I tune or fly crafts and I'm just switching stuff in between. So you do definitely have to specifically tune for either 24, 48, or 96 kilohertz PWM frequency from your ESCs to your motors. Lower PWM frequency is going to give you, your motors will run a little bit more warm. However, higher PWM frequencies, your ESCs are going to run a little bit more warm because they're cycling that in the FETs a lot faster. So if you're a racer and concerned about ESC kind of burning stuff, you might want the lower PWM frequencies. When it comes to the D-Shot 1400 or D-Shot whatever 1200, I don't see, that's totally separate. So what we've been talking about so far is between the ESC and the motor. So those two things. Let me see if I can go to here. Is that going to work? Yeah, there you go. Now it shuts off. I don't know, this handy cam sucks. What are you doing? I don't know, whatever. There we go. So we've been talking about between the ESC and the motor and talked about all those things. But if you go between the flight controller to the ESC, I don't see how the two things are not related. It's not like 96 kilohertz PWM frequency is paired up then with, D-Shot, higher values of D-Shot. That's just not how it works. One is the driving signal to the motors. One is how quickly it's pulsing in between here. So if you're looking at this graph, let me bring this back to here. Let me bring this over. See if that works. Yeah. If you're looking at this graph right here, this in between here where it's going up and down, up and down, up and down, that's your PWM frequency to the motors. The spacing between here and here and here, that is your signal from the flight controller to the ESC. So they're two separate things. Then they're not linked together. Like this spacing here is not linked to the refresh rate here. So I don't know that would make a difference. The other thing that I struggle with the D-shot 1400, 2400 and all that, those higher D-shot values is you're still only running the PID loop at, in KISS's case, 1K, or in Betaflight 8K or 4K, or even at for flight 1 32K. But we're talking about, so let's just go with the KISS scenario because there's a weird thing there where they're running the PID loop in most cases with the adaptive filter turned on at 1K. So the PID loop's running, 1,000 times per second. It's doing samples along the gyro signal. But then they're sending the signal to the ESCs out of that 1,000 times it's sampling. They're sending that, 24,000 times per second? So they're sampling the gyro signal, calculating stuff, and then they're sending it 24 times to the motor. That same thing, 24 times to the motors, then doing it again, 24 times more. So it just seems like you're sending the same answer to the ESC multiple times. I don't know that it hurts. I don't think that it hurts. And I think there's the argument, which I don't know if it's a strawman argument or not, is that, well, it's, that signal could be fluctuating. It's like, well, it's a digital signal. It's not analog. So it shouldn't be fluctuating. It's the same signal. And I just don't understand. Somebody would need to articulate to me why you need to send it so many times. The downside of a higher PW or a higher D-shot command rate is it introduces more noise. Anything that's faster has more noise in the signal itself. So you really want to run the lowest you can, unless you have a clear defined reason of why you need to do a faster rate, because faster rates involve all kinds of troubles that you don't need to deal with if there's no clear benefit to it. So, so Crunk brings up, let me see if there's any other questions up here. So yeah, we're still on the same thing. So Crunk brings up that KISS is running the full sine wave mode on the FETTech. So the sine wave mode, I'm even a little fuzzy on this sine wave mode. So the sine wave mode is, instead of this jerky signal coming in and out, it's how they're processing that for a sinusoidal wave. So I don't have to look into it a little bit more, but I'm not really clear on the benefit of it. I guess sine wave smooths things out a little bit more. I don't know how that ties into the DSAT 2400, but it might just be something I'm not fully aware of. What I understand is the sine is dithered between the samples. So you are sending the same signal, but they are averaged together. So you're sending the same signal, but they're averaged together. Yeah, but when you're sending it 24 times, if you take you're upping the signal. Yeah, here's my thing. If these settings between these D-shot values and all that kind of other stuff, if you're not tuning your quad, that's like 80 to 90% of it. Filter tuning and PID tuning are everything. If you're like, wow, I'm not going to tune it, that's too complicated, I'm going to screw around with the D-shot, this, that, the other thing, it's not going to make a difference. Those are the little, that's like the 80-20 rule. Those are the little things. The big things in my experience are the filter tuning and the PID tuning. But yeah, there could be some, advantage to that from a fundamental standpoint, but it's not on my, I guess, Crunk, if you have if there's a write-up or anything that anybody's like looked at this that articulates like data-wise how it's better, I've not come across that yet. So I'm a little fuzzy on it. All right, any other things on here? But we aren't using 1K like KISS. Oh, Betaflight, yeah. Works or no? there's a lot of things that, I mean, it just changes the refresh rate and speed of things. I don't know that it's going to make all the world of difference. One of the things that I struggle with, and you know, these refresh rates, we are sampling data down at like 60 to maybe up to 100 hertz. So comes back to that thing I did with the PID tuning or the gyro signal here, and you can come into that spreadsheet I have out there that you can kind of look at the sampling rate yourself and see how many samples we would be taking to measure a certain rate of motion. And the number of samples that 1K, 8K, or 4K and 8K are plenty. So we're dealing with really slow motion compared to our sampling rates. So, you know, we're only collecting data on the analog movement of the quad at 1,000 times per second. So let's just set that here. So in this little diagram here, this is 60 hertz prop wash, right? So let's just turn on. I think that will turn that off, yeah. Let's put P gain at, so let's do this. Let's do multiplier here. All right. So this is 60 hertz prop wash. This is being sampled at 8K. Let's get rid of the chat here for a second. Here we go. So you can see all these little sample dots in there. So you can see we're getting plenty of samples, right, at 8K. This is at 1K. So 1 kilohertz sampling, gotta wait for it to update. That's 1 kilohertz sampling. So here you can say it's like, I wouldn't say that that's plenty of samples for 60 hertz prop wash. I would say it's sufficient. It looks sufficient to me. You know, you're getting up around the crest here. I would say, and it's not, this is just a straight sine wave. You know, prop wash is a little bit more jagged, but it generally is kind of a sine wave like that. So I would say 1K is sufficient. Anything below 1K is really pushing it. I mean, you can see here, if I start going down to like 500 hertz, you're going to get, you got to kind of look up top here. You can see that, you know, you could be missing some motion here and there, but even at 500 hertz, you can see it's still sampling it appropriately. Now, if I go down to 100 hertz, you can see you'll actually stop sampling it, and you can see that it's still the motion that we were seeing before, right? It's still that prop wash motion, but you can see what the gyro would actually see is not what actually was occurring. Keep in mind that this is what the true motion looked like. Hold on, gotta wait for it to update. This is what the true motion looks like. But you can see if you sample it too little, like down at 100 hertz for 60 hertz noise, or 60 hertz motion, you don't have enough samples to accurately reflect the true motion. So this tool shows that, you know, and that's 60 hertz, that's prop wash. So really our movements of the quad are more like 10 hertz and lower. So even at 10 hertz, you can see we've got plenty of samples at 1,000 hertz, even at 100 hertz for the quad's motion itself, which is, you know, just going back and forth and things of that nature. Even at 100 hertz, plenty of samples for that. It's when you get into the faster motions like prop wash, you know, 60, and we can even say some prop wash, if you really have a tight tune, it's up at 80 hertz. So 80 hertz, you can see if we were only sampling at 100 hertz, which is 100 times per second, you can see how that looks, but the true motion actually looks like this. And this point of here, let's talk about that. That's a nice little segue in here. So this is 80 hertz prop wash motion, right? The quad's oscillating back and forth 80 times per second. It's like kind of wobbling 80 times per second, which is really fast if you really think about it. It's like that little flutter that you hear. Notice if you sample it too low, what's 100 is extreme. See how there's a peak every so often here? Look what happens when you sample it too low. Those peaks are way spread out. It shows a sine wave, but there's peaks are way spread out. That's called aliasing. So a higher frequency noise, or higher frequency motion or noise, if sampled too low, will show up as a lower frequency vibration. So this will actually, you'll have this really high frequency prop wash that the quad's doing, but this is an extreme 100 hertz, but it illustrates the point. But it's like the quad would be, it's almost like it's acting like it's fluttering. The quad's really fluttering really fast, but since we're sampling it too low, it acts like it's fluttering pretty slow. So that's what undersampling will do. And the reason aliasing is important is more for your high frequency vibrations. So we can talk about that in a second. So again, this is 100 hertz. This is 80 hertz prop wash. We're sampling it at 1,000 times per second. And you can see that that's sufficient. You can see if we go up to 4,000 times per second, that's sufficient as well. So now we're coming back to this 24 kilo, or the D-Shot 2400, things of that nature. As we are sampling this, if you look in between some of these dots, what we're saying for D-Shot 2400, so let's go down to 1,000 hertz, because that's what we're on this KISS thing, I guess. It means that it's calculating, it's detecting that point of motion, this one point. It's doing the PID loop calculations. It's getting a motor command and then sending that 24 times more before we get to the next sampling point. And then it does the same thing. So again, I'm a little fuzzy on the benefit, but that's what we're doing. So let's hit on this aliasing thing quick. I want to hit on that because I think that's interesting stuff personally. But let's look at this. So if I have vibrations, let's go. I wish I had a 350. So 400's I think good. So you got motor vibrations that are 400 times per second. Here's where the lower sampling rates can get you. So in Betaflight, we have 8K. So 400 hertz. So let's just go extreme here. Let's go 32K. So that's 400 hertz vibration. And that's sampled at 32K. So you can kind of see what that looks like. And it's sampling that, that vibration in the gyro signal plenty of times. So it's picking it all up. It's getting it all. As we reduce this sampling rate to 8K, you can see we are still sampling it sufficiently. And that's what the MPU 6000 and the other gyros do that are out in the market. They sample at 8K. So there's only two modes, 8K mode, 32K mode. There's actually a 1K mode too as well. There's actually some more modes in there, but the two that are used the most. I would assume that all flight controllers are using either 8K or 32K mode, and that's it. There is a 1K mode though, so it could be. So that's the sampling of the gyro signal itself. But then you have your PID loop that runs on this. So it might, if it's running at 4K, it's taking every other sample potentially, or it is averaging the two samples together, something like that, and then taking that data and running the PID loop calculations. So let's say we were actually running the PID loop at 1K. You can see how that motion, we are still sampling it enough that the frequency is the same, but the amplitude of each of the vibrations is not the same. So you start to lose amplitude resolution. So you might not be picking up, because there's not, it needs, if you can see in between these two samples, it actually needs another sample, but it's getting skipped, so it's not detecting the actual motion where it's up here. It's actually just jumping from this side to this side, where the real quad actually has the vibration going all the way up and then all the way back down. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. The only thing that can mess you up is that this is what I would call, it's not symmetric vibration anymore. So when it gets filtered out, you're going to get a little bit of a rougher ride, because the gyro, just the way it smooths it out with the filtering, any kind of low pass filter, it's going to have a tendency to peak up and then come back down for this, because this peak's not as high, and then it's going to peak up again. So you're going to get the filtered signal goes up and down, up and down, up and down a little bit. But as you can see, as we sample that lower, we're going to get that same issue of aliasing coming into play here, where now you can see that same motion, we still have 400 hertz motion as the real motion, is now translated. It's not being sampled enough, so it actually looks like it's lower frequency vibration stuff. And that can kill you on your filters. It will cause weird artifacting. It's like noise it's going to detect as noise that's in the signal, but that's not really at that frequency. It's actually up higher. So it doesn't filter it out. It's all kinds of issues. So that's why, we can't sample too low. And it's more than just the vibration, the motion of the quad. Motion of the quad is one thing, but there is another factor for the detecting and sampling accurately, at least enough for the motor vibrations, so that the filters, so that noise doesn't get aliased down as a lower frequency, which wouldn't get filtered out as much. All right, let's see here. All right, I don't have anything in the office hours, so no worries. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, I'm not sure why. There's got to be a reason. I would think Crunk, for that one of the questions that he was saying is not sure why the adaptive filter forces KISS to run down at 1K. I would think it's just a performance thing, because I believe the adaptive filter was introduced in KISS when they were still on an F3 processor. I believe. I'm not sure. So you might know better than I do. And I would think at that case, if the adaptive filter is any kind of if it has any kind of dynamics, it probably takes more processing power, so it probably needed to sample lower, so it had the PID loop. And it really comes down to, if you're looking at just simple stuff here, the PID loop only has so much time to run, right? So if you're sampling every 1,000 times per second, which is extremely fast, and it takes so long for the MPU to do calculations for a dynamic filter or adaptive filter or whatever it's doing, it has in between this sample and the next sample to get those done. If the samples are really close, it has to get them done faster, because the next data point's coming in, and if it's not, then you're going to get jitter in it will actually finish up calculations in the wrong order, and you get into all kinds of jitter issues. So that's where, if you're running more intensive CPU stuff, you have to run lower sampling rates. In Betaflight 4.2, they specifically, Bruce eTracer specifically worked on improvements in efficiency, so that the gyro sampling that Betaflight's reading into it is always at 8K no matter what. That's why it's locked now. And the only thing you can adjust is your PID loop rate. But with everything in Betaflight right now, you get I still generally run 4K because I don't really see the benefit between going from 4K to 8K. Again, this is 80 hertz motion. So that's like high-end prop wash. And if you can see the number of samples at 4K versus the number of samples at 8K, that it's sampling it plenty good at 4K. And same thing if I, go back down to 4K and I say, okay, well that's that, but what about your motion or your vibrations from the motors? Well, those go up to about 500 hertz for a 5-inch. You can see we're sampling it plenty good at 4K versus 8K. You know, it's still sampling it sufficiently that I'm not really worried about aliasing. So I don't really see a difference or a huge benefit to go from 4K to 8K. I definitely don't see a benefit to go to 32K. That's a whole nother subject. That's more marketing than anything. There could be one argument, but it's not about this. The one argument's the internal low pass filter the gyro has, but it's not a speed thing. It's definitely not a feel thing, because these are 32,000 times per second. You can't detect that kind of stuff. All right, set that back to here. Okay, so even KISS V1 has F3s, can run all the latest firmware. I don't think it's a CPU limitation. Yeah, but that's at 1K. So if KISS, the adaptive filter, requires it to be at 1K, there might have been a reason why. I mean, they like kind of built it into the firmware. Like you hit the adaptive filter and then it reduces the sampling rate. So it's like, oh, it works. It's like, well, of course, yeah. I don't know. I don't know if KISS is doing higher sampling rates. I thought 1K was their bread and butter. Like that's where they're right at, which seems to work fine. So like we talked about, it's sufficient. Let's go see if I can go back up the chat here. Oscilloscope, blah, 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 blah. Can you change and show how 32K sampling rate as well? Please, just want to see comparison. So what are you, so you were talking, so thrifty FPV. So 32, so we have the 80 hertz prop wash here. I think I did go up to 32K. So this is 80 hertz prop wash, which is about the fastest motion. I've never seen 100 hertz prop wash, but let's just even say we have 100 hertz prop wash. Let's just move that up to here. Like, that's a unicorn, 100 hertz prop wash. I've never seen one. I don't think people have talked about it either. But that's at 4K, and then this is at 32K sampling. So it's just a heck of a lot more. We gotta wait till it changes. It's just a heck of a lot more samples, but the end result is, am I seeing the same thing in the general motion here as I do in 32K that I do at 4K? And yes, I do. So it's not like I'm seeing a change in the motion. So they just sample a lot more. There's a lot more jitter in the noise. And honestly, what I've seen in the MPU, or I'm sorry, the ICM gyros, is there's a lot more baseline noising the signal, like even down at the lower rates. And I actually have now in my, I have another flight controller board that I just got in that has a MPU 6000 and an ICM. Now it's the 28806 or something like that gyro on it. So it's not the 2802. It's not the 2602. I think it's what I'm looking for. Yeah, it's the 20 something 686 or something like that. It's the newer gyro. Anyways, I'm gonna make some changes to Betaflight code so that I can actually sample both gyros at the same time and debug them, so we can see the difference on the exact same board of an MPU gyro versus the ICM gyro, and see what we see. And I'll run. The trick is I got to figure out, maybe I can change the code some more to run the MPU at, well, the MPU would be at 8K no matter what. It can't go higher than that. But then run the ICM at 32K. That's another variant I can run on that test. So I'm going to load that up here in the next month or so and do that testing. Might be surprised at what we see. All right. Yeah, PAL. So another question, anti-blog, saying that PAL iNav says that there is no difference between D-shot and multi-shot and one-shot. They're all fine, or they all feel the same. Yeah, they're not. It is not going to be a feel thing. It's going to be. There's two base things of quadcopter flying. One is what you can feel and detect, but the other part is you have a flight control board. You're not flying the quad. The flight control board's flying the quad. You're flying the flight control board. So you're giving the flight control board inputs. You're not controlling each motor. It does that. So there's a threshold where at the lower motion, the dumbed down parts, the 10 hertz, 20 hertz, maybe 30 hertz part, these lower, slower motions, that's the feel stuff. That's where tuning and filter stuff to some extent can have an impact. It's mostly the tuning. There's another part where there's stuff happening that the quad's doing and the flight controller's correcting for that you're not even aware of. That's the prop wash, when it gets a gust of wind blown on it, things of that nature. So when you're getting into like these higher sampling rates and the D-shot signals and all that kind of stuff, that's more for the computer part of the flight control board, for its auto corrections and all that kind of stuff. For the people part of it, that's kind of your rates and your PID stuff. So there's the disconnect in between the two things. Some things are for its performance to fly the quad, the flight controller. Other things in the settings are stuff that you can actually feel and detect and changes how your perception of it. But we cross those things a little bit too much. We think like, oh, well, I can tell the difference between D-shot 2400 versus D-shot 800. It's like, no, you can't. It's just not possible. But you can tell other things, obviously, with different rate settings and changes. So yes, I would agree with PAL, definitely. Yeah, so the other gyro that it was on there, thank you, it's a 2689 is the one that is on this board. So it's not the exact comparable. When I did that last roundup between the MPU and the ICM, people were asking about the 2689, and so this one has it on it. There is another flight control board that does have an MPU 6000 and a 2602, ICM 2602. I'm sure that will come up, but there's not going to be, I have flight controllers with both the 2689 and the 2602, the ICM series. I don't really see differences in them. The shock resistance of the 2602, the gyro that like Flight 1 uses and stuff, is higher than the 2689. So they're, on paper, they're a little bit more durable. People, have said anecdotally that they're more durable, but it's not like I've seen studies. I guess I hear some people talk some smack on the 2689 gyro, the newest gyro from the ICM, but I struggle because they don't work for TDK. So they're like, oh, their failure rate's higher. It's like, would you know that? What paper are you looking at from TDK that's showing you that their failure rate's higher for this other gyro? Like, or is this just something you think because you looked at the shock resistance level? And I mean, there's a correlation there. I mean, if the shock resistance level is lower, but doesn't necessarily mean the failure rate's higher. A lot of flight controllers use them, so I don't know. But yeah, that's the other one's the 2862. Would you mind showing us a video sometime about how debug Betaflight code and a flight controller without using the ST-Link, please? How to debug the Betaflight code and flight controllers without using... No, I'm not showing. I don't know how to do that. No, that's beyond that. That's beyond my pay level. I am not a core dev or anything for Betaflight. That's what I don't even know if those guys get into that kind of stuff when they're adding new code in. But mostly the Betaflight development revolves around using black box, honestly. So they'll put a new code, make a debug for it to pick out data on certain parts of as the process is unfolding. And we'll test fly that and see if the output as measured in the debug mode is anticipated what it's supposed to be doing. And if it is, then we'll roll that in. A lot of times the debug modes are left in the code. Some of them are really handy downstream. And you'll see the debug modes change a lot. And in the past, there was very little attention paid to them. They were kind of like a redheaded stepchild, but I think that's a little bit better now. And so that's good that they're leaving them in there and whatnot. But in the past, I remember distinctly talking to the devs about the debug modes, and they're like, well, why would a user use those? Those are just for the coders. And it's like, well, not gyro scaled. It's not. We need that. So so there's a little bit more attention's been paid to it, and they stay in there. But like I said, a lot of it's done with black box. But I will be showing how to use an ST link shortly on how to upgrade your R9 modules to Express LRS. And also, I believe I'm getting a Express LRS 2.4 gigahertz module. So it's the same thing as Ghost. It's just open source. And you can make your own Ghost module basically with it. And Express LRS would be the firmware. So the devs on that project have reached out and they're going to send me something I can feature on the channel and see how it goes, provide feedback, that kind of stuff. All right. Experience adaptive filter analogs. They really aren't that complex. Quite easy to implement, yeah. What else we got here for questions? Would ESC protocol change prop wash handling? I think if you go really low, like if you go to like D-shot 42, yeah, I think prop wash handling will get worse. Or D-shot 125. But I think if you're up at anywhere north of D-shot 300, no, I don't think it will. And it gets back to that sampling. If you're going really low, 100 hertz motion, 100 hertz is a way to look at how fast the quad is oscillating in prop wash. Well, D-shot 125 it's not even 125. You'd have to go down to like D-shot 42 or lower. So I don't think so. Here's the thing that I struggle with too, because people will watch this later or listening to it now and they're like, it's bullshit. I tell the difference. Yeah, but it's all anecdotal. Like scientifically, show me some way, like illustrating kind of like this, of how is it possible that it would have an impact? Because it just, the time frames, I think we get lost in the hertz and not realizing that 1,000 hertz. I don't think everybody just knows off the bat coming in the hot 1,000 hertz is just 1,000 times per second, 8,000 times per second, and you can convert that to time really easy. Just do the inverse. So it's 1 divided by 8,000 gives you the times per second. So it's pretty simple. So in my opinion, no, as long as you're anywhere north of D-shot 300, I think you'd be safe for prop wash handling. Anything above that, I don't think it hurts as long as the jitter in the signal doesn't go up. That's the key. As you go faster, you introduce more and more jitter in the signal. If the code is written in a certain way or the electrical performance of the quad, has good capacitance and all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't introduce jitter, I don't think the faster rates hurt. But they could if those things aren't held the same. If the jitter goes up in the signal, then it's not going to hurt. It's not going to help. It's going to hurt. What would it be the parameter to change when a 7-inch wobbles? So 7-inch wobbles. So let's talk about that. Could you talk about the Betaflight wobble? I've heard about that. I don't know what all the difference is. I think to some extent my guest here, I'm going to pull up Betaflight here. So for a 7-inch, the first thing I would do is I would start on 24 kilohertz PWM. That's, you know, everybody not agree on that, but that's where I would start, because again, the higher sampling rates. Oh, this isn't plugged in. Can I plug this in? Yeah, I will. Because the higher PWM reduces low end torque. That's already an issue, and generally on most 7-inch quads. Generally, the biggest problem I see with people with bigger quads is they're still trying to run them on 5-inch motors. You need to be running here. This is a 10-inch. Now, so it's not a 7-inch, I get that. But I see these more and more. These are 28. Let's see if I can hold it steady enough. 2812 motors. When you're running a 10-inch, you need 2812 motors. They're big props. When you're running a 7-inch, it doesn't hurt. I would say anything above an 8-inch, you need big motors. If you're thinking 22 something, you're wrong. That's no good. I mean, it will fly. It might not fly good. And when you have all these issues you can't get rid of, you can't tune out everything. So bigger motors. That's number one thing with if you're having wobble issues. If you're anywhere on a 7-inch, if you're anywhere north of, like, I would say the minimum I would go is 25 something, you know, so it's a 25 diameter, and then whatever for the height, the bigger the height, the better. If you're on 25 something or higher for 7-inch, you want to, I like tri-blades on the 7-inchers or any of the larger quads. The next thing I would do is turn off D-min, because that, if you're on the defaults, because these low D gains here, these 23, 25 are way too low for a 7-inch. And then I would just go through the 2-pack tuning process generally, and I've covered this before. Generally for a 7-inch, if I recall correctly, I can't exactly remember. I think we were talking, general advice is, yeah, I would start at 1.3 and 1.3 for the PD balance and PD gain slider. Oh, you can't see that. Oops. There we go. So PD balance and PD gain slider, I would start at 1.3 for both. And this is for a 7-inch. Generally on the larger 7-inch quads, 6-7-inch quads, your PD gain or your P to D ratio, like the P gain divided by the D gain, it's generally around a 1.0. It's basically what I see. As you get, like this one might not be, because it does have the nice big motors. As the motors are bigger, then you can start to bring this down. It might be closer to like a 5-inch, which would be around a 1.0, 0.8, 0.9, 1.0, something like that. But generally, because they're have more weight versus the motor size getting bigger, like they're growing in size and weight versus, you know, the motor. And it's a lot about the props and the disc area. It has to spin on that too. So it's not just all about the quad specific weight. Like you put the battery on here, throw it on a scale and say, well, it weighs about the same as a 5-inch. It's like, yeah, but that prop, that disc area, it has to spin a heck of a lot more weight to spin up and spin down than a 5-inch little propeller. So as the power to weight goes better, if you get bigger motors, you might be able to bring this down, and vice versa. There's some 7-inchers that, you know, I've seen up where it's actually inversed, where your P term is lower than your D term. So that's the scenario there. Generally, I would say for 6, 7, 8-inch, you want to have your D term starting in the 50s and go up maybe as high as into the 70s. You will probably start to get oscillations, D-term oscillations, when you get up to the 70s, but it's not guaranteed. You just keep pushing this up until you get those D-term oscillations and then back it down. If you don't know what I'm talking about, check out the 2-packs slider tuning video. It seems very popular. I think there's like 30,000 views on that now, so it seems like a decent one that was succinct enough. If you want more depth, you can check out the there's PID Tuning Principles series, and I have a document. See if I can pull it up here. It's tiny. So if you really want all the depth, you can do tiny.cc PID tuning. And that's a PDF write-up, and then it's linked to videos. So you can click on the links and go to those specific videos about, specific concepts in it. All right, 12 o'clock here now. Kids, I can hear the kids running in. So we're only going to be doing an hour here for today's office hour. Let me see if there's any Patreon stuff. So I want to make sure to take care of these guys. I really appreciate my patrons. I don't see anything of something in the Patreon chat, but if it's, I'll check that out later. But it's, I don't see anything in the office hour thing here. Nobody connected. Let me see if I can hit a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Yeah, I would like to try the special listed. I don't have to use the ST-Link and direct solder to the, yeah, you do have to use the ST-Link to update the first time. But after you update the first time, then you don't need to. So I'll show you how to do that. There's some videos out there now on it already, but I'm going to do a video on it and update my R9 equipment since FR Sky kind of put an end to life on the FR Sky R9. Hi, buddy. On the FR Sky R9 units, at least the non-access, the ACC ST version, they kind of put an end to life on them. See if I can go back to here now that my stupid Sony. What is the matter with you, man? If I touch the screen, see how it works. There's got to be a timeout feature or something. All right, let's see if there's anything else. I think multi-copters is probably one of the fastest techniques. Isn't it like 32K? 16. Multi-shot. Oh yeah, multi-shot. I think so. Yeah, it's an analog signal. So again, anything above D-Shot 300, you should be good. Down to beta flight 3.1 filter calcs, but it says these are corrupt when I try to open it. Interesting. So let me click on that real quick. I don't know, download it again. This is the one I've opened, so it's not corrupt on my computer. You can see it here. I don't know if you don't have Excel. Let me know. I can save it out too. If you're having issues, I can save it out too as an XL. Like this is an XLSX, so it's the latest format. But I can save it out to an XLS if you need it. Gotcha. Okay. Sounds good. I think that's you. Probably appreciate the massive amounts of work you're doing. Oh yeah, no, appreciate the support, everybody. I am going to probably. I'm looking at putting together a website to kind of collect all this stuff at one spot, and because there's just videos everywhere. So my videos, even other people's videos, just some trying to do like silos so people can go there hopefully and say, okay, from top to bottom how to do stuff, that kind of thing. So look for that in the future. I'm gonna probably work on that over the next couple months. It's gonna take me a while, but if you guys have any tips on a great service provider to start with, I would love to know. I'm thinking just WordPress to keep it simple. I got to settle on a nice, inexpensive hosting site that's decent. So any tips on that would be greatly appreciated. Thanks everybody for coming out this morning. Hopefully this was helpful, talking about some fundamentals and just be available and accessible. If, as always, if you have any questions or whatnot, feel free to reach out to me on the Discord. There's lots of guys always on here as well. Crunked is one of the moderators on there. He's always helping people 24/7. He's actually, to lead into this a little bit, he's actually going to start doing some tuning services as well on the side. So check out crunkedquads.com. I'm going to be doing a video on this later, but check out crunkedquads.com if you're interested. And he, like I said, he helps people out all day, all the time, but sometimes I've found that people just want higher priority. Everybody's helping out everybody when they can, but if you really need something, he can help. Crunked. He starting to peel off some time for this as well. Now it's not working. There it is. So crunkwalls.com. Similar to, I have tuning services as well, but I can't take everybody. It'd be all I do. And I have a day job and a family and kids. So he's jumping into this arena as well. So mine is tiny.cc/PID tuning service, but I'm actually backed up now until November. So if you're in need of immediate assistance, check out, either jump on the Discord if he has some time, or if you kind of want a higher priority status, check out his services here as well. Okay, guys. Well, thanks. And as always, I hope this helped. See ya.